Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are continuing our discussion of the third canto. We are in the first chapter. And this chapter onwards, it becomes exciting. It is always exciting to Srimad Bhagavatam, to read Srimad Bhagavatam and to share Srimad Bhagavatam. But this chapter onwards, you come in touch with personalities. You come in touch with the incarnations of Krishna. You learn about different aspects of how the devotees interact with the Lord. And there's so much to gather, so much to learn. It's just a fascinating experience because Srimad Bhagavatam is the personification of the Lord. And after the departure of Krishna, it is said that he took religiosity, he took truthfulness, he took all the wonderful qualities along with him because they were all personified while he was on the planet. And in his place, he left Srimad Bhagavatam. So the personification of Krishna after his departure to the sky was continued through Srimad Bhagavatam. So in reality, Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from the Lord. And coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam and also experiencing Srimad Bhagavatam modifies our life to such an extent that we start living Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why there's a distinction made between the book Srimad Bhagavatam and then there is the devotee, Bhagavata, who is living Srimad Bhagavatam because such a person has ingested the truth, has ingested Srimad Bhagavatam, and as a consequence, they are experiencing Srimad Bhagavatam not so much on a theoretical level, but at the level of experiences. They are no longer in the realm of faith, they are in the realm of experiences. So when you have experiences, then the word faith has no meaning, because if you can see that someone is in front of you, then what is the necessity for using the word having faith? Because you literally are experiencing the truth, the absolute truth. So the person plays a much bigger role because he is the active principle. She is the active principle, he or she, whoever is practicing Srimad Bhagavatam. The active has a lot more to offer because the active principle is not passive. By definition, the active principle is dynamic. And as a consequence, you come in touch with devotees and you have the opportunity to serve devotees who carry Srimad Bhagavatam in their hearts. And by serving devotees who carry Srimad Bhagavatam in their hearts, we receive bhakti from their hearts because Bhakti Devi, she sees our endeavor, she sees our sincerity and our humility and decides to come to us from the heart of the person Bhagavata. So that's why service becomes such an important relationship, especially with Vaishnavas. The Vaishnava Seva is one of the most important things, or the most important thing ever, simply because it allows Bhakti Devi to come from the heart of the Vaishnava who carries her into our heart. So it's a very, very important transition. So the person Bhagavatam or person Bhagavata, the Bhakta, the Vaishnava, is the dynamic principle. Srimad Bhagavatam in the scriptural form is also dynamic, but is passive by nature because you can keep Srimad Bhagavatam in the shelf. You can benefit from it someday when we wake up and say that there's a book in our shelf that we need to browse through because it looks like it's time for us to go do some research. Maybe you should read Bhagavatam. Yeah. So on that day, it becomes very fruitful. Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj, who is a great inspiration to us and who is a great inspiration to all his god brothers, because I've heard from more than one god brother who is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada that they practically were able to receive love of Lord Chaitanya by coming in touch with Gaur Govind Maharaj. Gaur Govind Maharaj His sound vibrations were so potent, and his love of Lord Chaitanya was so potent that whenever he spoke and whenever he came in association with devotees, the devotees ought to develop a special love. That's the beauty of the person Bhagavat. He carries Lord Gauranga in his heart, and by coming in touch, one comes to, in touch with Lord Gauranga, one comes in touch with the active principles of bhakti. Now, he had a wonderful example. He used to say that a donkey carries a burden throughout his life. An ass, in India, contextually, the ass is considered an associate of the laundryman, the washerman. He puts an enormous amount of load on the donkey's back. And the donkey, being an ass, has absolutely no objection in carrying the load because that's the nature. The nature of the donkey is to be a beast of burden. It carries the burden. And then the washerman releases the donkey when he is washing clothes next to a river, and the donkey grazes around in the free grass that's available. It's actually free, charging the donkey or the washerman for grass, but eventually he does carry the load for even consuming that which is available easily for free on the riverbank. Now, one day, someone borrows such a washerman's donkey who is a beast of burden, and that person wants the donkey to carry pieces of sandalwood. You see, chandan, the logs of sandalwood, they carry an extraordinarily powerful scent. And this donkey, which has been a washerman's donkey, which has been carrying dirty clothes for almost its entire existence, on one day the donkey is borrowed as a mule to carry sandalwood logs. On that day, receiving wafts of wonderful scent coming from the sandalwood, the donkey feels very fortunate because it's doing so well in life, because it's able to smell the sandalwood. So his Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj used to compare our lives to that of donkeys, where Srimad Bhagavatam, if it is kept passively at home and we don't even touch it for throughout our lifetime, one day this beast of burden will wake up and start touching Srimad Bhagavatam by the mercy of devotees, and as a consequence would feel very fortunate, like the donkey who carries sandalwood at least one day of his life. So in that sense, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Krishna personified literally, is passive. Is passive because you need to open Srimad Bhagavatam, you need to bring I'm sorry, there was an interruption. Were you able to hear me? Yes, okay. You should be able to dust Srimad Bhagavatam, bring Srimad Bhagavatam, and start reading Srimad Bhagavatam someday. And as a consequence, you can call it passive. It's not active because you need to act. But the person Bhagavata, the devotee who reads Srimad Bhagavatam and carries the message of Srimad Bhagavatam and who is living Srimad Bhagavatam, takes the message of Srimad Bhagavatam and goes to every town and village as ordered by Lord Gauranga, and he spreads the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, that's the active principle of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's considered even more fortunate to come in touch with devotees who are inspirers, who give us inspiration for Srimad Bhagavatam, who give us inspiration to read, inspiration to pick up Srimad Bhagavatam and to make it a daily culture, which is what Srila Prabhupada wanted. That's why our daily program has all the ingredients of the 5 most important angas. So there is Guru Puja and the worship of the deities, which is the same as, you can say in one level, it is Sadhu Sangha, but also coming in touch with the deities. There's constant remembrance of Vrindavan, as the Guru is remembered in the morning as a servant of the divine couple serving in the groves of Vrindavan. And then we have Nama Kirtan, Nama Smaran, which is Japa, which is the second most important principle. The first principle is Sadhu Sangha. We receive the ability to come in touch with sadhus who carry Srimad Bhagavatam in their hearts. Then we basically serve them and receive Srimad Bhagavatam. So Bhagavat Shravanam, because the Srimad Bhagavatam in its early stages, when it was spoken by Srila Sukadev Goswami, there's great emphasis on listening. There isn't emphasis on reading, but greater emphasis on listening. And Shrunvatam Swakatah Krishna, because listening carries the potency of the speaker and the faith of the speaker, and as a consequence has the ability to give us taste and give us ability to digest the sublime nature of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna, and unless we have deep sambandha, understanding Srimad Bhagavatam becomes difficult because one needs to have sambandha to understand Krishna. So deeper the sambandha, then there has a greater ability to relish Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why coming in touch with speakers is more important. Srila Prabhupada instituted that. That's why the morning class was practically structured in such a way that there is Namasmaran, there is Sadhu Sangha, there is Namasmaran, Namakirtan, and then there is Bhagavat Shravanam, then there is Sri Murti Seva, there's remembrance of Vrindavan. All of the 5 important principles, because our temples are constructed with the objective of Vrindavan, where Radha and Krishna are the center of attention. Sri Radha and Krishna are the center of everybody's world in Vrindavan. Our temples are constructed, or rather the altars are constructed, keeping that perspective in mind to be able to offer an experience which contains all the important ingredients of bhakti, which is Sadhu Sangha, Namasmaran, Namakirtan, Bhagavat Shravanam, which is to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam and to experience Bhagavatam, and to be able to hear about Vrindavan from those who experience Vrindavan, and as a consequence, they have the ability to share Vrindavan, and we experience Vrindavan through our hearing process, which is also going to be covered in Srimad Bhagavatam. And we engage in collectively glorifying the Lord's deity worship to encourage the pujaris who do personal service, but also the greater the participation in the arati, greater is the encouragement for pujaris. If no one is there when the pujari is working so hard to worship the deities, then how encouraged are the pujaris anyways? So the active principle is to be able to assemble so that the devotees who serve the deities also feel enthused, because they are putting a lot of effort in decorating and glorifying the lordships, and then they also feel encouraged. Our business is about encouragement, nothing else. So the idea is to come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam in many different ways, most importantly through coming in touch with the active principle of observing Bhagavatam in action through devotee interactions. Now, what is very interesting and intricate is that we hear of the Vedas, we hear of the Puranas, and then we hear about the Vedanta Sutras, which is the culmination of the Vedas. The interesting fact is, Srila Vyasadeva internally had very clear conception of Srimad Bhagavatam even before he compiled and wrote the Vedanta Sutra. In other words, the Vedanta Sutra, which is the Veda Anta, which is the conclusion of the teachings of the Vedas, is the Vedanta Sutra. It's approximately 550 to 600 verses. Now, every major sampradaya, including Sri Shankara Sampradaya, Adi Shankara Charya's Sampradaya, they all have commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra. What is interesting to note, that even before Srila Vyasadeva started work on the Vedanta Sutra, he had completed work on the compiling of the Vedas and then the Puranas themselves. What we have in the Puranas is an abridged version. The original Puranas are 1 billion verses. What we have is an abridged version, which is considered to be around, I think, 400,000 verses or something like that, but it is abridged. It's extraordinarily condensed, because that's the capacity of Kali Yuga, is everything is condensed. But the original version, which is found in the heavenly kingdoms, is 1 billion verses. Srila Vyasadeva concluded, after reading all of that, he already had internal conceptions. He was very clear about the conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam by the mercy of Narad Muni, Sri Narad Muni. After having internal ideas and very clear conceptions of what it is that he should do in terms of Srimad Bhagavatam, he understood Srimad Bhagavatam and the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. He wrote the Vedanta Sutras, which is practically the conclusion of the Vedas. And then, after writing the Vedanta Sutras, the internal conception of Srimad Bhagavatam, which Srila Vyasadeva had, it started becoming manifest externally. So, in other words, he already knew the conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam. He knew everything inside. He was relishing the nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam. He wrote the Vedanta Sutras, keeping that in mind, basically motivated by Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he released Srimad Bhagavatam for purview. He released Srimad Bhagavatam for physical consumption, in an external manner. So Srimad Bhagavatam, being called the natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutras, is actually an understatement. Srimad Bhagavatam is the origin of the conclusions of the Vedas. The Vedanta Sutras were released first because you don't release what's confidential first. Srimad Bhagavatam came later because Srimad Bhagavatam is very confidential. The Vedanta Sutras take one to the conclusion of what is the point in endeavoring for karma kanda, what is the point in accumulating credits and then engaging in kama, which is practically fulfilling sense gratification desires. And then what is the point in becoming frustrated and then pursuing the concept of moksha, which is liberation from the material sky. He practically wanted to put all of these aside. He said, what is the point in all of this? This is basically the Vedanta Sutra. The Vedanta Sutra starts with going deeper into the existence of the Atma and the existence of the spiritual sky. But that's very basic. That's very basic. Just knowing that there is something beyond the material universe or material creation and going into the spiritual sky is a very basic level of realization. It's very basic. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma is what is being guaranteed. As we use the word, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, Kaivalya, giving up basically the existence in material world and then aspiring for an existence beyond. It's very basic according to what is being granted to us by Lord Chaitanya. Srimad Bhagavatam is what lies beyond. Srimad Bhagavatam contains Sambandha. Krishna Sambandha is within Srimad Bhagavatam because you're interacting with Krishna when you come in touch with Bhagavatam. Principally, you're interacting with him, literally, in the literary form. And as a consequence, Sambandha Gyan can be given by Srimad Bhagavatam. You can receive Sambandha, Krishna Sambandha through Bhagavatam. And because Krishna Sambandha is the ultimate goal of all spiritual processes, the Vedanta Sutras are limited because they don't offer Krishna Sambandha. They just talk about an analytical aspect that you're not this body, and what lies beyond is what you should aspire for. But Krishna Sambandha is offered by Srimad Bhagavatam, which also is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutras, because the Vedanta Sutras themselves were conceived of by Srila Vyasadeva after he had fully realized Srimad Bhagavatam internally. He had not released Srimad Bhagavatam for external consumption, but the internal realizations were also fully manifest. This is the conclusion of Srila Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas. Now, quoting various scriptures, basically. Now, the point we want to make here is that that's our good fortune. Directly, Srila Prabhupada has cut to the chase. He has not led us around. We are not really beating around the bush. He has practically given us the most important essential aspects that can get us immediately in touch with the summum bonum. So our process of purification is not austerity. It is not purification of the subtle body as the yogis do. It is not the purification through many, many years of tapasya, etc. Our purification is understanding that there is the devotee who carries bhakti, and then there is the Lord. Our business is to come in touch with the devotee who carries bhakti in their hearts so that they could give us bhakti by direct service. And then we interact with the Lord under the guidance of the devotees. And as a consequence, our purification is absolutely on a platform where I directly come in touch with Krishna himself through Nam, through Bhagavatam, through his deities, through Vrindavan, Mayapur, and through sadhus who carry Krishna in their heart. So this is how our purification is. Our purification is not a matter of what we need to do. We are literally we are being pulled in touch with Krishna himself, who is the source of all purity. So he is the source of all purity. So this particular minuscule soul, which is very minute in its existence, which is us, comes in touch directly with the Lord. That's our purification. How efficiently we can come in touch with Krishna is the matter of sadhana bhakti, for which the devotee plays the most important role. If we don't understand that the devotee is the source and devotee's heart is the source of bhakti, Krishna doesn't interfere. It's an unfortunate understanding by the Kanishtas, those who are immature in their understanding of Krishna consciousness. They think Krishna, knowing Krishna alone, is enough. The answer is no. Krishna is carried in the hearts of his devotees, his entourage. Srimati Radharani carries Krishna. Srimati Radharani comes as Lord Chaitanya. She passes it on to Lord Nityananda, that mood of coming in touch with the Lord. He distributes it throughout the world through himself when he did it back in the 15th century, and then through the descendants, in other words, through the parampara. The point being that coming in touch with the Lord requires sadhana. It also comes with an understanding that the devotee who carries bhakti is extraordinarily important. Krishna will not interfere with the desires of Bhakti Devi. Bhakti Devi is independent. She resides in the heart of the devotee. When we see and treat the devotees well without causing aparad, then the devotee's heart basically opens up and Bhakti Devi notices us. Then she has the ability to travel from the heart of the devotees onto our hearts and empower us with bhakti. So this is such an organic, straightforward process that requires us to just follow these very simple principle and having an understanding that what's been given to us is so potent that it's not artificial at any level. It is so potent, it surpasses the objectives laid out by the Vedas and the conclusions of the Vedas. All the Vedas and the conclusions of the Vedas are contained within the endeavor of Srimad Bhagavatam. So one need not struggle at different levels. They just need to know how to receive mercy. They need to know how to position themselves as beggars so that they could receive mercy. You know, what's a beggar? A beggar is one who doesn't have something. A beggar is one who is deprived and does not have something which others have. So think about it for a moment, and it will become very clear as to what we need to do for us to receive what we are not qualified to receive or what we don't have. And Bhakti Devi, when she comes from the heart of the Guru, she comes from the heart of the Vaishnavas. She is nurtured by Harinam, she is nurtured by service, she is nurtured by the various interactions with the deity and so on and so forth, which is all about sadhana bhakti. This is basically how it is. Just as much as Bhakti Devi descends from the heart of a devotee into our heart and encourages our sambandha with Krishna, we should always remember that she can leave our heart. One who enters our heart can leave our heart because she is independent. That's why you cannot go to anyone for help, even Krishna's names, if there's Vaishnava Parad. You cannot even go to Krishna's names. Why am I saying Krishna's names? Because Krishna's names are the most merciful. Nama is the most merciful. You can't even approach Nama if there's Vaishnava Parad, which is the reason why it's the first aparad. So what I'm saying is that we have to understand that we are beggars and we are here to beg for something very special because we don't have any qualification whatsoever. And we are here to position ourselves very efficiently as beggars, remembering that we have no qualification and remembering that we are practically, begging for this mercy is the key to success, which is the reason why the simple devotee who is not efficient in their service, They may not be efficient in managing, they may not be efficient in pujari service, they may not be efficient in anything. Those simple devotees are simple in their hearts, like a child. They receive bhakti and they receive mercy quite easily because they already feel that they are quite humble. There are devotees who are extraordinarily efficient in what they do. And those devotees, they struggle with receiving. And the reason they struggle with receiving is because a lot of what they do is dependent on them. And they have a tendency to believe that even bhakti is dependent on them. And this is where the pitfalls are. Now, I'm not making a case for inefficiency. I'm not making a case for inefficiency. Inefficiency is useless materially and spiritually. I'm making a case for spiritual efficiency. Spiritual efficiency has to recognize the fact that bhakti resides in the heart of devotees, and the devotees need to be treated very carefully. Spiritual efficiency requires us to understand that despite all our best attempts, Krishna could still have his own plan. And we should basically understand how to step aside and allow Krishna to do his bit using us as instruments. The most successful devotees are those who have the ability to step aside. If they step aside, Krishna uses them as nimitta matra. He uses them as instruments. The most successful devotees are those who have the ability to understand their true position as being beggars. This is very important for us to understand. This is strategy. This is where the bhajan part comes. Bhajan, if you do very deep nam sadhana, if you do very good deity worship and are very, very fortunate and visit the dham, etc., then this bhajan contributes to a proper spiritual culture, proper spiritual ideas. Then the strategy that comes will come quite naturally. The strategy part is the efficiency part. That'll come quite naturally. Get the spiritual side first, then the efficiency part will work itself out. It's very important for us to realize in the movement of Lord Chaitanya, you might have very, very big qualifications out there in the real world, as we call it, yeah, the material world, but they would prove completely useless in the movement of Lord Chaitanya because we wouldn't even be able to do the smallest of things properly. Srila Prabhupada would chastise like anything. He would say that you're not even fit to do what a child does. And there was a real reason for that, because he was practically trying to position the soul to receive mercy. He wasn't trying to hurt his disciples. He was practically trying to position the soul, trying to remind them that, yes, you think you're intelligent, but no, you're not, because spiritual efficiency requires that you become spiritual first, and then efficiency would come when you realize the plan of Krishna. This is demonstrated in the second canto. Lord Brahma had to go through 1,000 years of tapasya for him to receive the blueprint of understanding what Krishna wanted him to do. Until then, Lord Brahma wasn't ready to do what his bidding was. So the point is, unless there is the sadhana and the bhajan, then a proper strategy won't come in place. It'll just be endeavor. That endeavor itself is also wonderful, because even if you fail 1,000,000 times in achieving what you need to achieve for Krishna, even if you think that you need to do this and you need to do that, it is still wonderful because we're becoming absorbed in service. So it's very important for us to understand that success in devotional service is not an outcome. The success in devotional service is to be able to receive mercy. It's not an outcome of a project. It is not the number of devotees. It is not the number of, the amount of pounds that you gather as a collector. It's not the number of books you distribute. It is practically what you have become internally. And that requires an understanding, which is where the real bhajan comes. Because as you chant, the chanting of Harinam will gift us humility. It will gift us compassion. These are natural gifts of Harinam. And as you take up Harinam very seriously, the gifts of Harinam will come upon us. And the gifts of Harinam, when it comes upon us, we will become humble. We will become humble, not so much in terms of low self-esteem. We will become humble in terms of understanding that we are completely disqualified to be a part of Lord Chaitanya's movement. This is the gift of Harinam. The more and more we advance, the more and more one will realize that they are not supposed to be a part of this movement. How is it possible that I can be a part of this movement? How is it possible that I can have an experience of, Vraja? How is it possible that I can be a part of Lord Chaitanya's movement? This this realization will dawn upon one who is sincerely holding upon their beads. When they chant, they will realize that they do not qualify under any circumstances to receive what is being given. This is why, as one advances, they become more humble. They become more and more humble. So, the first quality of advancement is to see humility come forth, not superficially, but internally, where the devotee understands that they are not qualified to be a part of this movement under any circumstances. This is real humility. And then, because Harinam produces a very soft heart, they become very compassionate to those who don't have the gift that they have received. Because they become very compassionate to those who don't have the gift they have received, they become quite helpless because, on one condition, they are humble. They are very humble because they find themselves completely disqualified. On the other hand, they have compassion, they want to assist. So, a combination of humility and compassion makes them cry out for help. Then Krishna sees and says, okay, you're humble enough to be used as an instrument. Then I will give you and I will use you as what I need to use you as a power. Then Krishna becomes involved in the life of the devotee. And that devotee becomes, a lightning rod, as we would call it, to inspire others. Because now Krishna is empowering them. Why is Krishna empowering them? First place, they feel disqualified. They feel humbled. They feel completely disqualified to be a part of this mission. And then they have great compassion. So this combination makes them absolutely fit graduates, or I would say recipients of very special mercy by Lord Chaitanya. So this is our goal. This is what we are trying to go there to. But all along, keep the basic ingredients and the basic goal very clear. We want to position ourselves to receive mercy efficiently. That requires deep humility. We want to constantly remind ourselves of our position, not so much, externally being refusing duty because you feel unqualified. Sometimes devotees, they refuse to do things because they feel unqualified. They think that's humility. The answer is no. The idea is that you take on everything, but then you understand that you can't do anything because you're completely disqualified, and you learn to step aside so that you could allow Krishna to help. This is how you do it. So, all along, our devotional service is about positioning ourselves to receive mercy. One should never forget that we are like the beasts of burden. We are like a beast of burden. And that beast of burden has no qualification to carry sandalwood pieces. That beast of burden was designed to carry old laundry. Yeah, that beast of burden was designed to carry old laundry. And all in a sudden, that beast of burden is now being carrying sandalwood pieces. And the beast of burden thinks that they're very special. Yeah. So we want to remind ourselves very carefully. So as we go along into this particular canto, one requires to understand that this canto is all about being able to understand how to endeavor. So you first read in the previous chapter that Sri Vidura, despite being Yamaraj, despite being a Mahajan, yeah, he is so powerful, Yamaraj, that he is such a big Mahajan, he is such a great personality. Despite being all of that, he basically felt that he had lost all his sukriti by associating with someone who had insulted devotees. And he went away to places of pilgrimage so that he could refill his coffers. He could refill his coffers. He went away. He practically went away to different parts of pilgrimage in India so that he could gather spiritual credits by coming in touch with sadhus. Places of pilgrimage are special because that's where sadhus live. And that's why association becomes easier. And it becomes wonderful because you can even just see someone practicing very sincerely and become inspired. So there's sadhu sangha quite readily available. Everybody is aligned with purpose, and everybody is aligned with the objective of wanting to serve the divine couple. So it's very easy for people to come here to the places of pilgrimage and become enthused. So he basically hid himself. He was under disguise. He was dressed as a sadhu with very, I would say, uh, simple clothing. And as a consequence, he was able to travel around to different places and receive mercy. As he traveled around to different places and received mercy, he practically was walking around receiving spiritual credits. So we first started out by understanding that even a great personality could become bereft of wonderful spiritual gifts, and he could become, his spiritual gifts could be plundered because he is in the association of wrong people. So it was fascinating to read in the first chapter, the previous few verses, that Sri Vidura had moved around wanting to do this. Now, we come again at a juncture to this chapter where we are wanting to listen to Sri Vidura's questions after he comes to Mathura. So he comes to Mathura Mandal, which is Vrajamandal. And after he comes into Vrajamandal, he is coming in touch with Sri Uddhava. Uddhava is a cousin of Krishna, and Uddhava looks like Krishna. So his physical features are also like Krishna's. And Krishna and Uddhava, they used to spend an extraordinary amount of time in Dwaraka together. So Sri Uddhava originally is a Dwaraka associate of Krishna, not a Vrindavan associate. He is a Dwaraka associate. And in Dwaraka, he spent an extraordinary amount with both Krishna and Balaram. And as a consequence, when Vidura meets Uddhava, he meets him on the banks of Yamuna in Mathura Mandal, basically in Vrajamandal, but close to Mathura. And this conversation is very revealing. The first verse, which is verse 25, I'm reading the translation, so you have to go to Canto 3, first chapter, verse 25. Then, due to his great love and feeling, Vidura embraced him, Uddhava, who was a constant companion of Lord Krishna and formerly a great student of Brahaspati. Vidura then asked him for news of the family of Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Now, very important, here, Sri Uddhava, he was a Brahaspati Sishya. Being a Sishya of Brahaspati means he was a great scholar, great incomparable scholarship, because he was a student of the guru of the demigods, who is considered to be the repository of all knowledge. And as a consequence, the viewpoints and the knowledge and the blessings which Sri Vidura had and the scholarship that he had was unparalleled. So he was an intellectual, so to speak. That's why the Srimad Bhagavatam qualifies him not only as Krishna's friend and Krishna's companion and cousin, but at the same time, Srimad Bhagavatam is mentioning that he was a great student of Brahaspati, which means he had conceptions of knowledge. So he was more driven by the intellectual aspect of his existence because he was trained by Brahaspati to use his intellect. His intellect was filled with all kinds of wonderful Vedic phenomena, all kinds of knowledge of how to process things, etc. You see, the Vedas are very intricate. The 6 different branches of the Vedangas, 6 branches. One of the branches is Jyotish, the other is Vyakarana, Kalpa. These 6 branches of the Vedas practically would develop the senses of the student so that they could develop deeper realizations, because all these 6 angas of the Vedas, they were associated with different sensual capability. So pure senses equals pure gathering of knowledge, and as a consequence, the ability to process and reach conclusions. So there's a Vedanga study. Then after studying the Vedangas, they would go into the actual body of knowledge, the Vedas. For example, with Jyotish Shastra, which is astrology, it is one of the angas or a limb. And the purpose of studying Jyotish is to develop the ability to see things, because Jyotish is associated with sight. It has more to do with fire. It has to do with the element of fire. and intuition. So the point is that as one studies the different angas, they develop certain capabilities. And once those capabilities are in place, the senses themselves, as due to constant study, the senses develop fully. Yeah. So someone who is studying Jyotish, more than, very seriously, would definitely be coming in touch with the Agni aspect of the Vedas. Then they have the ability to digest scripture. They have the ability to see things which others can't. So there are many aspects which come along with the study of the body of language, sorry, the body of the Vedas, which is Vyakarana, etc., different angas. So this is a person who was trained by Brahaspati to study the Vedas. So he practically was extraordinarily well established in processing everything through his intellect, because the repository of Vedas and the guru of the Vedic knowledge was already his guru. So he's being described as a Brahaspati Shishya, an intellectual person, and a companion of Krishna. So these are both qualities. Now, where is the disqualification? Being a Brahaspati Shishya and being a studier or a great student of the Vedas, a scholar, it's very difficult for Sri Uddhava to forget his scholarship when it comes to Vraja. So, for the Vrajvasi who hasn't studied scripture, they do not see Krishna as Narayan. For them, Krishna is Krishna. There is no confusion. But for someone who has studied the scripture, then Krishna is Narayan. And as a consequence, Krishna is God. And Krishna can't basically be limited to just being a cowherd boy, because the residents of Vraja fell in love with Krishna, the cowherd boy. Mother Yashoda did not see Narayan. Mother Devaki saw Narayan. Mother Yashoda did not see Narayan. Nanda Maharaj did not see Narayan. He saw Krishna, the cowherd boy, his son. All the residents of Vraja, the gopis, the gopas, they saw Krishna, the cowherd boy, the son of Yashoda. They did not see Narayan. So the apparent disqualification of Uddhava was that he knew Krishna in Dwaraka as Narayan. And when he comes to Vraja, that knowledge and the training received by Brahaspati, given by Brahaspati, to accept Vedic conclusions and scripture to such an extent that they will dominate more than the sweetness of interaction. You see? So the Aishwarya Mai, the aspect of opulence of Krishna, is understood by the residents of Dwaraka. The sweetness is understood by the residents of Vraja, because in Vraja, the opulence of Krishna is covered over by his sweetness. So we read a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam where they say that Uddhava, as he was entering into Dwaraka, from Dwaraka to Vrindavan, as he was entering Vrindavan, he was coming and he was traveling in a great chariot. This royal chariot, as it was entering Vrindavan, it was during sunset, and all the cows of Vraja, they were returning home. And there was tremendous amount of dust which flew due to the hooves of the cows and covered over the sight of anyone of Uddhava's chariot. So Srimad Bhagavatam comments saying, the opulence of Dwaraka was covered over by the sweetness of Vraja. So Krishna in Vraja is sweetness personified. Uddhava was trained to disseminate, kind of look at everything from an intellectual perspective. As a consequence, he could never understand the feelings of Yashoda Maiya and Nanda Maharaj. When he visited Vrindavan from Dwaraka, Krishna sent him as a messenger, and he came and he met Yashoda Mai and Nanda Maharaj. He could never, ever understand what they were going through, because they had no conception of Krishna as Narayan. He had conceptions of Krishna as Narayan. So you can imagine that Sri Uddhava, who is a constant companion of Krishna, even he was not qualified for Vraja Bhakti. He did not understand Vraja Bhakti because his intellect was so powerfully trained by Brahaspati that that intellect itself could not be subdued by the sweetness of Vraja. So he couldn't understand Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Maiya's feelings as to what Krishna was doing and what he was not doing in Dwaraka. So the point we are trying to make here from this very first verse is to distinguish that you can be a companion of Krishna in Dwaraka, but for a Vrajavasi, Krishna is not Narayan. For Uddhava, trained by Brahaspati because he was an intellectual, the emotions were subdued by intellect. He could not accept Krishna as the cowherd boy. He could only see Krishna as Narayan. So the point is, even Sri Uddhava, the very close companion of Krishna from Dwaraka, was not qualified for Vraja Bhakti. Please understand that we are trying to aspire for Vraja Bhakti. Can you imagine what our qualification is if Uddhava was not qualified? If Sri Uddhava was not qualified, where do we stand in trying to embrace Vraja Bhakti? This is what has been given to us by Lord Nityananda. This is the mercy distributed by Lord Nityananda. At what level of confidence can we even say that we are qualified for Vraja Bhakti and that we are pure and we are this and we are that? What is our qualification if Uddhava wasn't qualified? That is the statement that is being conveyed here, that he was a Brahaspati Shishya, he was an intellectual, and he was Krishna's constant companion. But then in the 10th canto, we can see that he is trying to counter the statements of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai, that statements of separation were being countered by Uddhava through intellectual arguments. This is the point. So even he was not qualified. Mother Devaki did not see Krishna as a son because at the very first night when he was born, Mother Devaki saw the four-armed form of Krishna as Narayan. She practically saw him as Narayan. How could a mother forget the four-armed form of her son, newborn son? Can she ever forget? On the other hand, Yashoda Mai, she receives Krishna in the two-armed form and never knows he is God. That is Vraja Bhakti. She only knows her love for her son, and she experiences the love that he gives her. This is Vraja Bhakti. So we are trying to qualify for something which the residents of Dwaraka, such as Krishna's mother and Krishna's own relatives, such as Uddhava, were not qualified. This is history. This is recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, why should it be so difficult for us to be humble in this movement? Why should it be so difficult for us to understand our obvious disqualification to be a part of this movement? Why should humility be a struggle? Why should we even have misconceptions of purity? What is exactly purity in the context of someone who is a constant companion of the Lord in Dwaraka coming to Vrindavan and not being able to understand Vrindavan? So you can imagine what's been given to us is so special that the only thing that we can do is beg. We can only position ourselves and constantly beg for mercy and be very, very, very careful of the Vaishnavas in not so much being afraid of, but more so in terms of being grateful. Because the more one is grateful, the greater their ability to see the opposite person in the proper light. So this is basically what's being conveyed to us here, because Srimad Bhagavatam does not waste words. Why bring up this Brahaspati connection to Sri Uddhava? They are giving us information that Uddhava was an intellectual. Sri Uddhava was an intellectual. But we will understand the meaning of this verse when we go to the 10th canto. At this time, we should understand it from the perspective of what it is designed to be. He was a great scholar. He was practically blessed by Brahaspati. He was trained by Brahaspati, which is no ordinary thing. And Sri Vidura met with him. The next verse, whether the original personalities of Godhead who incarnated themselves at the request of Brahma, who is born out of the lotus flower from the Lord, and who have increased the prosperity of the world by elevating everyone, are doing well in the house of Surasena. Now, this is a very strange question coming from Sri Vidura. Sri Vidura knew Krishna had departed. He knew the Vrishnis had destroyed themselves. He knew all of that. Yet he was asking Uddhava, Sri Uddhava, these questions. So here, Sri Jiva Goswami comments that this was more of, I would say, a psychological question than a practical one. Meaning, that if you know someone has departed who is very dear to you, your your intellect has heard that news that someone has departed, but your mind and your heart still wants to believe they are on the planet. And as a consequence, psychologically, Sri Vidura is asking this question as to the well-being of Krishna and the Vrishnis, even though he knew they had departed, because in his heart he really wanted to know, whether what he had heard, which was so shocking, was indeed true, and he was hoping it wasn't. Now, the original personalities of Godhead. So, the original personalities of Godhead that are being mentioned here are Krishna and Balaram. Balaram is non-different from Krishna except by color. He is the first expansion, the immediate expansion. And it is Balaram who expands into Vasudev, Sankarshana, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna. Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. The Vasudev, Sankarshana, Aniruddha, Pradyumna in Dwaraka are expansions of Balaram. He is the origin of everything beyond Vrindavan. Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. Lord Balaram is the Sevaka Bhagavan. So if there is anything to be done for the well-being of everybody, then he moves out of Vrindavan. Krishna can never move away from Vrindavan. Text 27. Please tell me whether the best friend of the Kurus, our brother-in-law Vasudeva, is doing well. He is very munificent. He is like a father to his sisters, and he is always pleasing to his wives. So, Vasudeva, the father of Krishna, one of the sisters of the father of Krishna, is Pritha, Mother Kunti. And because she was widowed at a very early age, because of this widowing at a very early age, Vasudeva especially was very, very caring of Mother Kunti because of the grievances that she went through at a very young age, very, very young age. And this is why Sri Vidura is talking about the brother-in-law Vasudeva and is a father to his sisters and is always pleasing to his wives. Because Vidura is like a brother-in-law to Mother Kunti, and as a consequence, he can call Vasudeva as a father-in-law. Brother-in-law, Vasudeva. Now, because Kunti was the younger sister and she was bereaved of her husband Pandu, and Mother Madhuri, who was the co-wife, she committed sati along with Pandu. And the principle of sati was such that the fire of separation of a chaste wife in a previous yuga was so great that that fire of chastity and separation was equal to the physical fire that was built during the funeral. So the fire of separation, which Mother Madhuri was burning from because she was so chaste, there was already a lot of Agni. When a woman is chaste, then her nature is like that of fire. So that's why Mother Sita, she could enter into fire and walk out unscathed. And the reason why she could walk out unscathed, because her quality was that of the fire. Her chastity was like fire. In a similar fashion, one enters into physical fire, they're not harmed because their internal quality is also like fire. So in a similar situation, in the previous ages, women used to commit sati because the fire of separation and their own tattva, their chastity, was so fiery by nature that at the separation of the husband, they could sit in the funeral fire along with the husband's body and be incinerated. So the pain of separation and the fire of their nature was such that they could tolerate the fire, the physical fire, because their internal fire was intense. In the present age of Kali Yuga, the chastity standards are not the same shastrically. Shastra expects one shouldn't even think, one shouldn't even have the slightest of thoughts, etc. So it's a very different standard. So the present day Kali Yuga, the chastity is not so high. And as a consequence, this whole practice of sati is just a social custom which had no meaning. So it is good that it was abolished, because if the fire of separation and the quality of the woman's chastity is not equal to Agni, blazing fire, then committing them to sati is torturing them. So this is the Shastric conclusion. So in the present age, it makes no sense. And which is why it was abolished, because it became a social custom, and then it was just torture, because the women had no qualities to bear the external fire. They couldn't tolerate the fire that was coming through. Anyways, it's a sidetrack, but I was just wanting to mention that she was alone. Because she was alone after the departure of her husband, Vasudeva had a tremendous amount of care and concern for Mother Kunti. And that is being noticed by Sri Vidura. And that's why he's raising the point about Vasudeva, the brother-in-law who cared for his sisters, because he was like a father. Text 28. O Uddhava, please tell me, how is Pradyumna, the commander-in-chief of the Yadus, who was Cupid in a former life? Rukmani bore him as a son from Lord Krishna by the grace of Brahmanas, whom she pleased. Now, Pradyumna, the son of Mother Rukmini and Krishna, was empowered by the quadruple expansion, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. The quadruple expansion, Sankarshana, deals with the false ego. So that's why the expansion of Lord Sankarshana and the worshipper of Lord Sankarshana is Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva and Shiva Tattva is like Guru Tattva. The Guru removes the false ego. Lord Shiva removes the false ego because he cannot tolerate, false ego. As a consequence, the whole destruction of what is false, even though it's real, but it is temporary, the whole destruction of the temporary phenomenon of the material world is done by Lord Shiva because it represents false ego. So Lord Sankarshana is the origin of Lord Shiva, and he is also worshipped by Lord Shiva for inspiration. And Lord Sankarshana, who is basically the second expansion, is the Mula Sankarshana or Balaram in Dwaraka. And Pradyumna is the principle of intelligence. So the empowerment of intelligence comes from Sri Pradyumna. And in the eternal spiritual sky, he is Cupid, who is also an eternal associate of the Lord, Kamadeva. All of these confidential aspects are explained in great detail by Srila Jiva Goswami. But for our purpose, we want to understand that Pradyumna was the son of Krishna and Mother Rukmini, and he was empowered by the third of the quadruple expansions, Pradyumna. That Pradyumna is, the potency of Pradyumna is intelligence personified. Intelligence basically comes from Lord Pradyumna. The principle of intelligence comes from Lord Pradyumna. The false ego, or the concept of false ego, the origin is Lord Sankarshana. And the destruction of false ego, you can't really keep any falsehood near a very potent spiritual master. You can't keep any falsehood in front of Lord Shiva. They will enrage, they'll become very enraged, angry, they will destroy that falsehood. And at the same time, Lord Balaram was also like that. If you notice Balaram's activities in the Krishna book or in the 10th canto, he doesn't really play around while killing demons. He is not like Krishna. He is very straight in the fact that, this falsehood cannot exist in front of me. So you can imagine, that he was very straight in practically putting an end to whichever demon he came in touch with. He doesn't play games because he can't tolerate it. Similarly, his expansion, Lord Ananta, when he sees that there is great false ego where people are not able to recognize their spiritual nature, he destroys this entire creation by the fire that erupts from his eyes. This is Ananta, who is non different from Balaram. So their worshipper is Lord Shiva. The first Shiva comes from Lord Ananta. Then he expands into the many Rudras, the principle of Rudras, who maintain the different lokas and who are worshipped. So the point which you're trying to make here is the principle of false ego is dominated by Sankarsana. He manages that principle. False ego basically attaches itself to the mind and the mode of goodness. So if you want to relieve the mind of false ego, you need to come at least to the mode of goodness. And then the intelligence that we carry is from Sri Pradyumna. If you want to really develop your intelligence to be able to serve the Lord and want to be able to use your intelligence in his service, then Sri Pradyumna is worshipped. And then you have Sri Aniruddha, who is the principle of the mind. Now, all these personalities, they descend along with Krishna when he descends on his pastimes here. So here you have Kamadeva, who is Pradyumna, who is born to Krishna and Mother Rukmini as their son. And then further, we're going to read about the other associates. Oh, my friend, tell me whether Ugrasena, the king of the Sattvatas, Vrishnis, Bhojas, and Dasarhas, is now doing well. He went far away from his kingdom, leaving aside all hopes of his royal throne. But Lord Krishna again installed him. O gentle one, does Samba fare well? He exactly resembles the son of the personality of Godhead. In a previous birth, he was born as Kartikeya in the womb of the wife of Lord Shiva. Now he has been born in the womb of Jambavati, the most enriched wife of Krishna. Samba is the son of Krishna and Jambavati, one of his other wives. And Samba is the demigod Kartikeya. Kartikeya is very, very special. Kartikeya is very, very special in the sense that he was born out of the spiritual potency of Lord Shiva. So this is practically the manifestation of spiritual potency of Lord Shiva is Kartikeya. So he was considered to be the knowledge potency of Lord Shiva. If Lord Shiva's potency of knowledge, which was fiery by nature to such an extent that if he sees ignorance in front of him, that fire would emanate from between his eyes, it would destroy the ignorance in front of him. In a similar fashion, that particular manifestation of fire is personified in the form of Kartikeya. And then Kartikeya is very highly worshipped in the southern state of Tamil Nadu. In India. He is considered basically one of the most principal deities in Tamil Nadu. And he basically incarnates as Samba. Now, why Tamil Nadu is because it is said that the language spoken in Kailash is Tamil. And as a consequence, all the 64 devotees of Lord Shiva, like the Alvars, the 12 Alvars, the 64 Nayanmars, they were born in and around Tamil Nadu. And they were all basically extolled Lord Shiva through their works. And everything was done in Tamil because the language spoken in Kailash amongst the associates of Lord Shiva is Tamil. And this is also said and shared in Ramayana by Lord Ram. And Sage Agastya, for example, is also someone who was trained in Tamil by Lord Shiva himself. So there's a lot of things that were written by Sri Agastya Muni. Now, the point being that he is personified, he is worshipped in Tamil Nadu, but he's worshipped as the son of Mother Parvati and Lord Shiva, as one of the family members of Lord Shiva. Here we notice that the same Kartikeya is born as Samba, who is the son of Krishna. Now, he is basically, he resembles Krishna. He resembles Krishna. And he basically is an expansion. he is an expansion of the Lord himself in such a way that he resembles Krishna. At the same time, he is also um, Krishna, Lord Shiva's knowledge potency. One moment. So we're going to 31. O Uddhava, does Yuyudhana fare well? He learned the intricacies of military art from Arjuna and attained the transcendental destination, which is very difficult to reach, even for great renouncers. Yuyudhana is Satyaki. He was basically a close associate of Krishna. He used to travel with him. And then during the enactment of the Mahabharata, you can also read about the fact that he accompanied Krishna to the court of the Kauravas. And he was a fierce supporter of the Pandavas throughout their exile, because he was also a student of Arjuna. He learned archery from Arjuna. And he was considered to be a very close associate of Krishna and Arjuna. Now, this Yuyudhana, he had spiritual advancement where he had practically developed very deep Sambandha Gyan with Krishna. Being born with Krishna, in and around Krishna's family as a Vrishni, is one thing, but to know him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and have Sambandha with him is another. Yuyudhana, Satyaki, was fortunate because he was self-realized as well. He knew Krishna as the Supreme Person. He knew Krishna, and he knew he had Sambandha Gyan. He had eternal Sambandha Gyan with Krishna. So it's quite interesting that Sri Vidura is mentioning that here, saying that has Yuyudhana fared well? He learned the intricacies of military art from Arjuna and attained the transcendental destination, which is very difficult to reach even for great renouncers. So he had qualified himself to go beyond the greatest of transcendental destinations of having Sambandha with Krishna, understanding his eternal nature, understanding Krishna's eternal nature. So he practically fit into the mold of what needs to be done when one has an opportunity to be born in close proximity to the Lord. Because there were some who were born in and around Krishna, like Shishupal, who practically disparaged him. They practically went against him. They were called Pratikula. So there is Anukula and there's Pratikula. This is Anukula, favorable, but then beyond favorable is to actually know Krishna as who he is and to know who we are in the relationship. Yeah. So when we use the word Anukulyena, Krishna Anushilanam, Anukulyena for us in the verse given by Srila Rupa Goswami means following in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani. For us, Anukulyena is not favorable. We should strike that word. For us, Anukulyena means knowing Srimati Radharani's mood and understanding how to follow in the footsteps of the associates of Srimati Radharani, which is our Guru Varga. Our Guru Varga, our disciplic succession is from Radharani. And knowing the mood of Radharani is Anukula. So our Anukula is not being favorable to Krishna, saying, oh, Shishupal was unfavorable and he was Pratikula. I am Anukula, which means I am not angry at Krishna and I'm not hurling curses at him. So I'm much better than Shishupal. The answer is no. For us, Anukula means following in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani. Verse 32. Please tell me whether Akrura, the son of Swafalka, is doing well. He is a faultless soul surrendered onto the personality of Godhead. He once lost his mental equilibrium due to his ecstasy of transcendental love and fell down on the dust of a road which was marked with footprints of Lord Krishna. Now, Akrura, there is Akrura Ghat, which is in Vrindavan. Yeah, you can go from here to Akrura Ghat as well. There are different places here. One of them is Akrura Ghat, where Akrura briefly stopped on the way to Mathura. And as he stopped on the way to Mathura to take a dip, he was able to see Krishna as Narayan and Balaram as Ananta, on whom Krishna reclined, Sesha. So this vision happens in Akrura Ghat. Now, the point is that this Akrura, he saw a footprint of Krishna. He could recognize all the divine symbols. And because of his extraordinary attachment to Krishna, he fell unconscious. So there was ecstasy. This is prema. There was ecstasy. And because of this ecstasy, ecstatic prema, ecstatic emotion, ecstatic love, the body, the physical body, wasn't able to understand that ecstatic love. And as a consequence, when the subtle body, or rather the soul, went through ecstatic emotions, the physical body became unconscious because it was too powerful for the physical body to undergo. So this is very important for us to understand that the ecstatic emotion of fainting displayed by Lord Chaitanya and some of his associates, all of these were due to the manifestation of prema in their hearts, whereby the jolt of prema of the soul practically leaving the body briefly, associating with the Lord in the spiritual sky, causes trauma to the physical body, where the physical body shuts down because the physical body doesn't have the capacity to understand those deep emotions. And that is what's noticed during Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. You notice it during the associates of Lord Chaitanya, as we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Akrura Prabhu went through a similar emotion where Vidura particularly brings up that quality to put Sri Akrura in that position, a great position. As the Vedas are the reservoir of sacrificial purpose, so the daughter of King Devakabhoja conceived the Supreme Personality of Godhead in her womb, as did the mother of the demigods. Is she doing well? So here, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is conceived by Mother Devaki, and here she is compared to the mother of the demigods, Aditi, because the mother of the demigods, Aditi, she carries Krishna as Upendra, as Vamana, and in a similar position, Mother Devaki is carrying Krishna in her womb. So that comparison is being brought forth here, but then she is being inquired of, saying that how amazing is the position of the mother, that the conclusion of the Vedic sacrifices and the reservoir of all sacrifices, which is Krishna himself, is contained within her womb. So she herself is so special that she could contain this great personality who is the reservoir of all the Vedic conclusions. He is the origin of everything, and she is practically containing him in her womb. So that glorification of the mother's position is being said here. So is she doing well? Quite fascinating. May I inquire whether Aniruddha is doing well? He is the fulfiller of all the desires of the pure devotees and has been considered from Yo to be the cause of the Rig Veda, the creator of the mind, and the fourth plenary expansion of Vishnu. This is very important. Rig Veda, very specifically, has mantras, very specific mantras, as opposed to the Yajur Veda, which focuses on fire sacrifices. The Rig Veda focuses on mantric chants. For most part, there are different rigs. For example, the Purusha Shuktam, Sri Shuktam, these are all from the Rig Veda. Now, the source of Rig Veda is Lord Aniruddha. Yeah, Lord Aniruddha is the fourth quadruple expansion. He is the principle of the mind. And he is also the source of all mantras in the Rig Veda. Why so? Because they're equating the mind, the mental principle, and mantras. All of them are connected to Lord Aniruddha. Yeah. Oftentimes, in many lectures, you would see me talking about Lord Aniruddha. And I've also spoken about the fourth canto, chapter 24, 36, and 37, the glorification of Lord Aniruddha. Lord Aniruddha basically is the principle of the mind, but he is also the origin of the Rig Veda. He is also the cause of the origin of the Rig Veda. And then he is also basically the, what we would call as the son of Krishna, son of Krishna. So basically, here we are talking about Sankarshana Pradyumna Aniruddha, Sankarshana Balaram Pradyumna, and then there's Aniruddha. Now, here, I think he comes as the grandson of Krishna. So here it's different. Now, in Lord Rama's situation, Lord Rama is Vasudeva, which is the first quadruple expansion. And then there is, sorry, the quadruple expansion. He is Vasudeva from the first quadruple expansion. So he's equal to the Dwaraka expansions. And then you have Lakshman as Sankarshana. And then you have Bharata and Shatrughna as Pradyumna and Aniruddha. So there are 4 expansions in the Ramayana, and there are 4 expansions in Dwaraka. But the origin is Krishna in Vrindavan, and the expansion of Krishna is Balaram, who then expands into the first quadruple and the second quadruple expansion. "35. O sober one, others such as Hridika, Charudeshna, Gada, and the son of Satyabhama, who accept Lord Sri Krishna as the soul of the self and thus follow his path without deviation, are they well? Also, let me inquire whether Maharaj Yudhishthira is now maintaining the kingdom according to religious principles and with respect for the path of religion. Formerly, Duryodhana was burning with envy because Yudhishthira was being protected by the arms of Krishna and Arjuna as if they were their own arms." Yeah, quite amazing how Yudhishthira was protected by Krishna and Arjuna, both. The arms of the king, having such powerful arms, Krishna and Arjuna. Text 37. Please tell me whether the unconquerable Bhima, who is like a cobra, has released his long cherished anger upon the sinners. The field of battle could not tolerate even the wonderful playing of his club when he stepped on the path. Yeah, I mean, there was like an enormous quantity of warriors who were put to death by Bhima alone. Yeah, his appetite for destruction was so great, his anger was so great that's the most prominent quality that's being brought forth here. And imagine the strength. He was like a Rudra. He practically had the strength of Shiva in destruction on the battlefield, where he would not tire. He could just consume millions of people's lives and he wouldn't tire. That was Bhima. Text 38. Whether Arjuna, whose bow bears the name Gandiva, who is always famous amongst the chariot warriors for vanquishing his enemies, is doing well. He once satisfied Lord Shiva by covering him with arrows when Shiva came as an unidentified false hunter. This is a famous episode from the Mahabharata where Arjuna is tested by Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is defeated by Arjuna in this skill of archery. And very pleased with him, he gives him the Pashupatastra, the divine weapon. Are the twin brothers who are protected by their brothers doing well? Just as the eye is always protected by the eyelid, they are protected by the sons of Pritha, who snatched back the rightful kingdom from the hands of the enemy Duryodhana, just as Garuda snatched nectar from the mouth of Indra, the thunderbolt carrier. So Indra has a thunderbolt which is formidable. And Sri Garuda, he snatches the Amrit from Indra, despite Indra having such a formidable weapon. And he distributes his Amrit. He brings that Amrit. He doesn't distribute it, he brings it. So in the similar fashion, the Kauravas, protected by Bhishma Dev, Dronacharya, and others, they were considered formidable in military strength, but they were all put to defeat by the Pandavas, just as much as Garuda snatched nectar from Indra. So I think, how many more verses? I'm just wanting to see. I think I'll stop here, and then we have a few verses. We could do it next week. I'll stop at 41. Sorry, 40. Verse 40. We should do from 40 onwards next week. So I will take some questions if you have any, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for a nice class. Prabhu, my question is on the sati. I just wanted to understand what happens, say, for example, I leave my body um, um, when it's not the time. So you lose the gross body and you have a subtle body. In sense, you become a ghost, correct?
Um, yes, technically, once we separate from the physical body, the subtle body is separated, and that is what is called a ghost. If it doesn't find a suitable place for it to come back. Now, what is important is our Shastra says that for a full year, there is a specific type of body which is called a preta, which is granted to those who leave the physical body. And that body is a precursor to being delivered into the womb of a mother. Now, until that particular obligation is fulfilled, then the living entity, which is the subtle body, lives as a preta, which itself is one kind of a body, not necessarily uh, what we would call just the subtle body. It's a variation of the subtle body, which can be called, in English we call it a ghost, but in Sanskrit it is very clear. It's a preta. Preta itself is a class of beings. They cause obstruction, they cause disturbances, they disturb relationships, they do all kinds of things if they're not satisfied.
So generally this happens when your time in the planet has been untimely, that you have left untimely, that you hang around as, correct?
No. These days, it's more complex. These days, even if someone dies of old age, because coming back to a family is so complex. Those days, there were four varnas. And it was very easy to say that a soul has performed karma in a varna in the previous life. And in this particular lifetime, the soul can go either to the next varna or they could be in the same varna, depending, or the varna could be degraded. But these days, it's very difficult to identify the varna for anyone. One could be Brahminical by quality, but they end up working for someone, so receiving salaries. So they become a Shudra by nature of their activity, but then their qualities could be Brahminical. And then you have a circumstance where they have aspirations that don't go beyond their city. Everybody is watching movies, and then you have someone born in India going to America, someone born in America coming to India. It's a very big mess in terms of complex karma, in terms of where someone could be brought back for them to experience their karma. It's very complex. As a consequence, these days when people leave their bodies, the demigods themselves find it very difficult to put them back in a physical body based on the previous karma. As a consequence, the waiting list is very, very long for physical bodies. That's why the word human birth is very rare, despite the fact that we have 6 billion people on the planet plus. We still can say that the human birth is very rare because finding birth in a human body, having an opportunity to do devotional service is so, so rare. And this has to basically be it. Now, we are very fortunate as devotees because when we leave our bodies, if we have to come back, it is very easy for the demigods to see that most of our life has predominantly been used to develop the identity of a devotee. So it's very easy for them to pick us up and put them in the family of devotees because most of our karma is in the realm of devotees. Most of our karma is in the realm of what we accomplish as devotees. It's very easy for them to give us bodies. Plus, you have the intervention from the spiritual master. You have intervention from Srila Prabhupada. There are so many different interventions depending on who we are. And as a consequence, for us to receive a body, you can say, is almost certain within a very, very reasonable period of time. That is not the case with even your average pious person, because karma has become very complex and there's a tremendous amount of, I would say, souls who need karmic combinations to come back and they cannot, because such karmic combinations are not that easily available for the demigods to come and bring them back. So there's a lot of pressure from those who have died and who haven't gotten bodies, which is imposed upon those who are living. And as a consequence, people have mental issues quite easily. They feel depressed, they feel this, they feel that. All kinds of challenges that they experience come through the fact that there are other entities who are also influencing them, because these entities themselves haven't found a place to go. It's actually a very sad circumstance, but this is the complexity of the present day world, because a kid staying in some part of the world aspires to be somewhere else. They end up going there. And you can just imagine the complexity of the activities that go on and the number of connections. And imagine the number of illicit connections which people have these days, either through the internet and so many different places, where it's very difficult for people to know how to process all of this and give them a body so that this karma could be executed. I'm not trying to paint a dire situation. This is the truth. And the best solution is to be in devotional service, because under the care of the spiritual master, we are guaranteed to continue devotional service, which is the greatest good fortune that's been given to us by Srila Prabhupada. So we are considered to be the most fortunate under all circumstances.
Right. That's very consoling, Prabhu. My question was trying to understand sati, where women were giving up their lives voluntarily, and later on it became a social aspect. When a woman voluntarily gives, and it is before your time of leaving the planet, when you come in, you already have a jataka, you already know kind of when you're going back. But now, because the husband has died, the woman is jumping in, which is in one sense, you're just giving up the suicide or giving up the gross body. So
No, it isn't. No. Sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean to, but I was wanting to say the chaste woman who does sati, her future is where the husband goes. She doesn't want to go anywhere else. She is going to follow the husband, and that is what the demigods will arrange.
True,
Wherever
but
the
then
husband
in
goes,
that
she will
case, the
go.
husband's time has come and he's going naturally, but she's going, so she will end up as a preta, won't she?
No, she will be given an opportunity with the husband because of her chastity. Yeah, there's a lot of power in chastity. Yeah, unchaste women can reduce the longevity of their spouses. When there are extramarital affairs, there would also be illnesses to the spouses. This is all unknown facts, but this is all very true because these are shastric. So what I'm trying to say is there's such a deep connection between the spouses, according to the Vedic paradigm, that when the husband leaves, the wife leaves as well. When the husband is present, the husband's spiritual activity is given one half to the wife because she serves him. And the wife depends on the husband's spiritual prowess to leave and reach the destination which the husband reaches. And as a consequence, this whole concept of sati was done voluntarily and was not considered to be suicidal. It was because they couldn't bear the separation, and it was not ordinary. It was the fire of separation. We use the word fire because it was literally like being on fire. They could sit and experience physical fire, which for them was much better than the fire of separation. So that's the context.
Right. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. All right. So any other question?
Hi, Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Haribol.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Wonderful lecture. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So, Prabhu, this is regarding having a mood of humility as well as a mood of a receiving. In devotional life, I think it definitely gives us a lot of advantage. But how to balance that in outside world, especially if you have an office environment where a lot of politics, a lot of things happening where you may need to fight it back, because if you have a mood of receiving, then undue advantages could be taken, and it could create more problem in a person's career or a person's work. So how to balance those?
Actually, this is seen in the Mahabharata, because if you understand, in the Mahabharata, The office environment for the Pandavas was very complex. Internally, they were deeply surrendered devotees of the Lord. So there was extreme enviousness, there was competition. They tried acting according to their nature, but their aspiration was to serve the Lord. There was no other aspiration. So they constantly tolerated the circumstances of the outside world. It doesn't mean they allowed themselves to be trampled upon, but more so they tolerated the circumstances. And then they also basically constantly wanted to please Krishna, wanting to know what is it that would please him. So Krishna very confidently could go to the court of the Kauravas and ask for 5 villages. Instead of saying, give half the kingdom, he could ask for 5 villages in compensation for the Pandavas, because he knew that his devotees are completely satisfied being devotees and they would be happy with whatever he grants them. So our mood is also the same. So what we need to do is we need to go to the outside world and we need to do a dharma. In doing a dharma, there could be some obstacles. Say, for example, you could be executing a project, and while you're executing the project, there could be someone whom you need to chastise, someone whom you need to basically, be tactful with, someone whom you need to communicate with, and a lot more than someone else whom you don't need to communicate with at all because they will understand what to do. These are variations of the environment, and the environment can also give you a goal. The environment could say that you have been such and such for so many years, now you become this. Now, this is the environmental demand. We should always cross check this with whether we are desiring the right thing for the longer term in Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, there is no such thing, in the material world, there is no such thing as a good desire. In the 10th canto, Srila Prabhupada writes that even if one were to desire Krishna as a son, that is just sex desire. So you can imagine, even if one desires Krishna as a son, that is just sex desire. Being in a material body is just sex desire. This is what Srila Prabhupada, and it is true because in the material world, it is very difficult to find out what is the right desire which would please Krishna. So that's why we desire sadhana as given by the Guru. We constantly try and see whether our life and sadhana are matching. We constantly make arrangements and adjustments to improve upon sadhana. This should be the purpose, because as we do this, we know we are in alignment with our Guru's desire. We also know we are in alignment with Krishna's desire, because Guru's desire and Krishna's desire are the same. So in the outside world, we make adjustments. We are tactful. If you have to be not harsh, but what we would call as being assertive. We can be tactful. We can be assertive, and we can also be, I would say, very focused on executing what's been given to us, leaving the results to Krishna, whilst tolerating the circumstances. You see, a devotee is supposed to tolerate, not get enmeshed to the point where they enjoy the outside environment, which is where we find it very difficult. The devotees are meant to tolerate. What is the meaning of the word tolerate? Who tolerates good things? Nobody talks about tolerance and good things. Everybody has to tolerate only bad things and nonsense. So when Krishna says tolerate your life, he literally says, Trinadapi Surichena Tarori Vasaishnuna, you tolerate life because it is going to be bad, because your happiness is going to be aligned with me. So we constantly endeavor to make adjustments to spiritual progress, whilst we tolerate the circumstances outside, but we also understand the dharma of the place where we are. So if a certain place requires a certain kind of dharma, you execute it. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, what is fascinating, I reflect on it oftentimes. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, you will notice that very heavy, violent treatment is meted out to offenders. Now, one would say, I am really a creature of peace. I am looking for peace. How would violence fit in? But then you notice in Srimad Bhagavatam that the kings in Srimad Bhagavatam were very, very harsh, because they knew that the mode of ignorance cannot be dealt with in any other way other than punishment. So there is a certain dharma associated with the environment and with certain kind of people. And to keep certain people in their place, you need to basically engage in the dharma, while all the time you're tolerating it. You're not plugging into the atmosphere. You're not aspiring to grow in the atmosphere, because that growth, unless it contributes to spiritual life, is of no use to us. We are constantly endeavoring to improve upon and position ourselves for improved spirituality. So that's how the balance should work. It's an adjustment, but it doesn't mean we go in there and then be trampled over, because Krishna also says, the Bhagavad Gita also says, Prabhupada always says, this world is not a place for gentlemen. So you can't be a gentleman here in a society surrounded by, thieves. As a consequence, you basically need to do whatever is the dharma that is required there without becoming that dharma. And at the same time, focus constantly on the identity of being a servant of the Lord. So that's the balance. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. And if you allow, just one follow-up question on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm able to understand, the balance part. But many times, what happens that the spiritual aspect overshadows the material aspect. Like in the work environment, sometimes you are doing in such a way that you're not following the dharma. And many times, other way also works, that if a particular day, particular week, you had to do a lot of things which are not aligned with being humble or being in having a receiving mood, so that overshadows the spiritual aspect. So
True.
in that situation, it is not like a switch, right, where okay, now I just switch on this part and I'll become humble and have a receiving mode, and then switch off, and then you'll go back to your work environment. So how to transition that easily? Like, are there any practical
Yes.
ways we can do?
Yes. Transitions, you are 100% right that there's no such thing as a 180-degree turn. In fact, the reason why devotees who work for a living and who are constantly in the outside environment because of their obligations, they struggle to make progress over 20, 30-year periods is because they're constantly flipping consciousness. So you go into an environment which is against you, and then you come back home. Whatever you do in the night and early in the morning, it again gets completely trampled upon because you're out there in the different environment. And as this continues, the anarthas increase because you're exposed to this passion ignorance of the outside world. And then dangerously, we also develop desires because our own passion ignorance increases because we're in touch with passion ignorance. There is no shortcut. It's practical. The practical shortcut is to desire to be free from such engagement. The reason why we are where we are is because some time back, regardless of whether it was this lifetime or the previous lifetime, we desired this. Now our business is to desire our way out of this. So our present situation can be changed through desires and sadhana. Desire a very positive outcome of being freed from this kind of endeavor which is meaningless, and to be engaged in endeavor which can add more value to Krishna consciousness. Desire this very actively along with your sadhana, because when you desire this along with your sadhana and when you're chanting, then Krishna will manifest this outcome over a certain period of time. You may not get there in 5 years, but you'll get there perhaps in 8 years or 10 years. Then the remaining part of your life, you are free to use that time in the service of the Lord more fruitfully and being insulated from these environments. So desiring, writing down what you need for you to be free. And when I say writing down, people don't understand it. They don't even realize that writing down what you desire before you do your chanting is important. Remember, if you don't write down, and you're chanting and you're bringing Krishna into the atmosphere, you're doing your Gayatri, you're doing your deity worship, you are bringing all kinds of desires in touch with spiritual potency. But instead, if you write down very specifically what goals you would like to achieve for you to be free of this constant flipping of 180-degree turns morning and night, then over a period of time, your meditation can be crystallized. This writing down has to be done. This is what I need. And when I say writing down, I'm talking about being practical, about wanting shelter of a certain kind, being able to meet obligations, etc. Nothing wrong in writing down, because we will learn to live with what Krishna lives as, gives us as we make progress, But writing down and then refining it as we go along is very important, so that our sadhana doesn't constantly get impinged by 1,000 different anxieties, and it gets impinged by 4 or 5 that you have a chance to reflect on and control, which is why writing down becomes important. So 2-point program. 1, very simple understanding. We are where we are because we desired this. Now we don't like where we are, so we need to desire our way out of here. Combine your desires along with the potency of being in touch with spiritual nature. And spiritual nature will see that your desires are sincere, and then the future will change, regardless of when it is supposed to change. That's up to Krishna. So that's my advice.
Thank you so much, bro. It makes sense.
Sure. Any other question or comment, please? Well, there's a question. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam. My doubt is that I heard that mode of ignorance cannot be corrected by sweet words. And then at the same time, we want to rectify certain situations in our lives by not committing any Vaishnava aparadh. We try to approach seniors for that, but at the same time, we try to convince ourselves that this is Krishna's arrangement so that we can make a progress. How to strike a balance there and continue our devotional service?
Very important to constantly fix ourselves in the idea of what is the safest approach as far as Vaishnavas are concerned. So the safest approach as far as Vaishnavas are concerned is to approach seniors and to be able to share our mind and allow the seniors to deal with anyone else whom we feel is doing something wrong. This is what we need to do. We always need to remember to follow the most safe process. Second, most importantly, if we are in conflict with a Vaishnav or a Vaishnavi, the first thing that we ought to do is to take the blame upon ourselves. We are the cause of conflict. And we can surely be the cause of conflict because we are experiencing something. So if someone, as we are walking along in the road, crosses the road and slaps us, yes, there is karma involved. That person is wrong, but we also had karma because someone hit us, so we had karma to experience that. So there are 2 points. First and foremost, understand that for us to understand and climb over any misunderstanding and conflict, we have to take responsibility of the circumstance ourselves. We should understand that it is our own fault. Krishna will give us intelligence when we do that. Next is we need to pray for whomever we think is faulty, because then we are not looking at the faults, we are looking at the Vaishnavas themselves, and we are dealing and wanting to deal with them with compassion. Third would be, safest is to approach seniors and never allow any conflict to grow where we start becoming obsessed, because nothing is more important than the safety of our spiritual journey. So it's very important for us to also seek that shelter. So these are 3 steps that I would recommend.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you.
Sure. All right. So was there anything else?
Bro, I thought there is a question on chat. Bro.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll take a look. Okay. The first question is, did Sri Uddhava become a blade of grass in Sri Vrindavan Dham as he aspired to become one? You know, the aspiration of devotees is so many different things. We do not want to think that Sri Uddhava became a blade of grass. Even becoming a blade of grass in Vrindavan requires the highest of qualifications. Imagine being a particle of dust that is touched by the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani and Krishna and their followers. That's no ordinary situation. So becoming even a blade of grass is a big deal. But devotees, out of the humility, want to, out of the humility in understanding the glories of Vrindavan, want to position themselves in such a position of being a blade of grass. So that's what Sri Uddhava reflected. So we do not want to think that he has just become a blade of grass. Now, the next question, this is from 1.2.21. What does it mean one sees the self as the master? What is the difference between one and self here? I think this is more semantics, I would say. One sees the self as the master. Basically, this is more semantics to say that the self is the soul, and one is referring to the one who is basically identifying with the body and the soul together. Yeah. So we identify with the body, and as a consequence, we have to understand that we are a soul. So one can make a statement saying one sees the self as the master, because the extent to which the self is the master, there is no concern. But the extent to which the body is seen as the identity, then the self as the master has to be understood. That's the difference. He sees himself as well as the Lord. How should we understand the statement of one seeing himself and the Lord? Seeing is chakshu, shastra chakshu. Basically, for us to be able to understand who we are, cheto darpanam arjuna, our reflection in our heart, as the heart is cleaned, we see ourselves as to who we are. We also see the beloved as who they are. So as a consequence, we see Krishna and ourselves. So that's what is being spoken of here when they use the word seeing himself as well as the Lord. Then there's another question. Please, can you explain how to deal with devotee who has a lot of envy towards you? That's a big problem, isn't it? Because envy is actually very destructive. It is destructive because it is said that you can bring any quality to the spiritual sky, but you can't be envious. Nobody is envious in the spiritual sky. Yeah. One can be jealous, but one can't be envious. Jealousy is when you desire something which someone else also has. Envy is when you want the other person dead so that you could have what they have. So it is like saying, my neighbor has a Mercedes. I would love to have a Mercedes. This is jealousy, feeling jealous that the other person has something good. But it is another thing to say, my neighbor has to die so that I am the only one who can ride the Mercedes. And that's enviousness. This is completely perverse, because the origin of envy is extraordinary, intense material desires. Intense material desires to the point where it is destructive. It is like being in the body of a snake. A snake, because of the conditioning, cannot distinguish a 3-year-old carrying a small stick versus a 30-year-old man carrying an iron rod that can be devastating for the snake. The snake cannot distinguish between the two. The snake will strike the 3-year-old and the 30-year-old man with the same level of venom because it carries envy. It doesn't have the ability to distinguish. It doesn't have any discrimination at all. Discrimination, intelligence is lost when there's such deep material desires that are not satisfied, which is basically lust, not being satisfied, turns into wrath, and wrath consumes intelligence, and everything else is lost. So this is the sequence of envy. So how do you deal with someone who is envious, has a lot of envy towards us? What we need to do is we need to chant the different Kavach mantras. There could be verses in the Kavach mantras which practically says, let the envious glance upon us be removed. So do the Kavach mantra and try serving the person, because when you start serving, then the relationship changes from one where the person feels that they need to destroy you versus one where the person themselves feels served by you. So this enviousness can be destroyed if you were to serve the devotee, serve someone who is envious of you. Yeah. So actually the word devotee and envy, they don't go along well together at all. One cannot exist along with the other. Yeah. What devotion can they show when Bhakti Devi understands that they want to destroy a devotee? So it doesn't really help. So do Kavach mantras and position yourself in such a way that you're able to serve to the extent possible. And also pray for the person because they're really damaging themselves. Any other question or comment? I have 5 more minutes. Okay. Um, one moment. Which Kavach mantra should Vaishnavas do? There are many Kavach mantras. You could do Narayana Kavach, you could do Sri Narasimha Kavach, you could do Sri Varaha Kavach. All three are fine. Okay, we feel fortunate to be a part of ISKCON, but can we at the same time feel attached to other bona fide sampradaya while continuing our preaching effort? Being in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, that's not an issue. Appreciation of some other Sampradaya, which is also bona fide, which is Vaishnava, is not an issue. In fact, appreciation is actually nice because then we don't really cause disturbance in our hearts when we see other Vaishnavas just because they wear a different kind of tilak and then they wear clothes differently or they eat a different kind of food or they sing bhajans in a different language. And then, yeah. So that is not a bad problem. That's not a problem at all. I don't understand the question. What is the difference between self-respect, ego? Are you asking whether there's what's the difference between self-respect and ego? Or I don't understand the question. Okay, so what's the difference between self-respect and ego? Yeah, self-respect, basically self-respect and ego. Basically, the point is that amani manadena, amani manadena, amani, which is basically the concept of where we don't care about how others treat us versus how we treat others, then we are able to chant. When is it a position where we don't care about how others treat us? It is a position that is attained by those in the mode of goodness. As we gravitate to higher and higher and higher levels of consciousness, less and less and less would be the influence of passion and ignorance, and less and less and less would be the passion and ignorance, less and less and less would be our attachment to what we consider to be ours and what we consider to be us. So, in the mode of goodness, even in the material nature, one is able to tolerate circumstances of life much better. That includes how people treat us and what people do to us. In the transcendental platform, on the transcendental platform, they do not even experience this because they don't find it even perceptible. So it is not even a problem in the transcendental platform. False ego is when we identify with our body, and when someone does not treat us well, we immediately want to retaliate and destroy them. The extent to which we identify with the false ego is the extent to which we are away from the mode of goodness. The false ego, or the concept of who we are associated with the body, in other words, who we are in our identity associated with this world, it gets attached to the mind in the mode of goodness. During the process of creation of the subtle body, false ego or the identity which is false is attached to the mind in the mode of goodness. So if something gets attached in the mode of goodness, you need to go to the mode of goodness to resolve it. That's why as you go to the mode of goodness, the so-called great need to be respected one way or the other goes away. And as that great need goes away, then what does happen is that one is able to constantly be able to offer good quality, good behavior to others, regardless of how others behave towards us. So I think I've explained both. All right. So I'm going to stop here. It's almost 7 o'clock, and we will continue again the following week with the chapters, and we will move forward with that. On the 15th, which is Govardhan Puja, the Birmingham Yatra has invited us to speak that particular weekend on the pastimes of Krishna, Govardhan Leela, very specifically. So I will be speaking on Govardhan Leela. Perhaps I will share, or devotees from Birmingham who, like Mayapur Madhava Prabhu and others, they can share the invite on WhatsApp for others who join here. So I will be speaking on Govardhan Leela then. Just wanted to let you know. And you can join as well. I think it's at it is 11 in the morning or so. I'm not sure. 11 in the morning. All right. So 11 in the morning, UK time. And I will share the invite. I believe it's reasonable, even if you're joining from the US. Let's go with Puja. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us. Hare Krishna. Wish you a good weekend. And we'll look forward to joining again for Sangha the following week.